welcome to We Never Met, the podcast where I have an interesting stranger on every single week. And today I have
Trevor Rose-Hamblin of Old Irving Brewing Company in Chicago, Illinois.
How are you doing?
Man, I'm pretty good. Yeah. I'm a brewer, so I'm just like always and perpetually tired.
Is that like a thing amongst brewers?
Yeah, I think we're always tired people.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's because we party harder than most people.
It's like part of the job, kind of.
Right. And then we also work really long hours and harder than most people. So we're just perpetually tired.
Always tired.
That's right.
And we were just talking about you have recently, is it recent? Do you have a kid or?
Oh, I don't have a kid.
Oh, you don't?
No kid. I'm starting a family, which means I've gotten married in the last year.
I gotcha.
Just celebrated my 1 year anniversary.
Oh, congrats.
And I think we want to start a family. That's kind of on the itinerary.
That's when you're less tired.
Yeah, when I'm less right. Yeah. You try to make kids when you're rested and you've stretched.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
So you're the head brewer and co-owner. Or are you the solo owner?
No, I'm not the solo owner. So I have a business partner. His name is Jeff Lindemeyer. He's awesome. Him and I kind of are the owners and operators of the business, and then we have a series of investors. So we do have quite the team of investors, all guys that Jeff kind of knew from before because all my friends are poor. So yeah,
you can't look to them for any.
No, they're great for emotional support and drinks and hangs, but it kind of that's where the buck stops. Yeah.
So we were talking, and you're not from Chicago.
No,
you're from Detroit. You said, or Michigan?
Michigan, Detroit area.
Okay.
So I was born in Lapeer, which is kind of on the lower part of the thumb of Michigan near Flint.
Okay.
Was born there. My whole extended family lives out there.
Yeah.
Grew up in Ypsilanti, right next to Ann Arbor, so home of Eastern Michigan University.
Yeah.
And then spent my really young years, my formative years in Eaton Rapids, which I think when I lived there had 100,000 people in it. We had a parade when we got a McDonald's. We were real pumped. And
yeah. Wow, that was a big event.
It was a huge event. It was almost as big as the time we got meth. So was
there a parade for that?
It wasn't really. It was a weird parade. It was really short, and everyone ran back inside right away, really itchy. It's weird. Michigan for the kind of stuff I like doing. Well, now it would be great, if I had found brewing earlier. But for restaurants or finding any kind of work, really, it can be kind of tough.
It wasn't developed at that point.
No, it wasn't really developed, and it wasn't really good for a guy with little education who really didn't have grand ambitions of doing up college the full way and all that stuff. So working up and working for really badass chefs or working in the restaurant industry or working in the brewing industry would have been really tough because there wasn't a lot of that around.
Right, there wasn't a lot to choose from.
Yeah, so I went to the nearest the nearest oasis, which
was Chicago.
Yeah, it's a very fruitful oasis. Lots of good stuff here.
Yeah, because how early or how young were you when you decided that you kind of wanted to get into food and in the industry in general?
I remember when I was 7 years old, I took a pickle and I wrapped it in bologna with some mustard. Yeah. And I was like, fuck yeah. I did it.
This is it.
Oh man. I knew right then. No, it wasn't that early. It's really
impressive though.
All right. When I was in high school, I really enjoyed a lot of different things. I did like cooking. I came from a pretty diverse background. I mean, my mom had been divorced and she had remarried this guy named Don Anderson, who was a quadriplegic. And so I grew up kind of around the disability community, and he was really an activist for his community, as well as my mother, who had a series of mental illness issues throughout her whole life. But I kind of glommed on to helping people and really liked doing that. I was a swimmer, and I was kind of already a captain at my junior year, and I kind of retained that captain role. And so I really like leading people. I knew how to connect with people. I think just through a lot of life experiences in a very, very few years as a young man. We had a huge family because obviously I had my mom, my dad, and their extended family. And then all of a sudden I had this stepdad with his extended family, and then his community of people with disabilities. And then, I think we lived in 4 or 5 different places when I was a little kid, just me and my mom bouncing around when she was a single mom, just trying to find where she fit. So I always liked entertaining. I always liked talking to people. I loved cooking. I loved, and it was cool because Don, being a quadriplegic, couldn't use his hands, but that dude loved to eat.
Yeah.
And so he would I would kind of be his hands when he would have ideas or whatever. So that's kind of where the cooking started. And then, I started busting suds, washing dishes in restaurants when I was like 14 years old. A place called Cosmic Garden.
Okay.
I was always really upset that the hippies wouldn't let me get high with them in the shed where they always got high. So I'd throw ranch packets at them or whatever, vegan ranch packets, and then yeah, you kind of go through like this whole cycle where you love your industry, you hate it, and you come back and forth. You're like, I'm not sure if I'm gonna do it, but there was things I liked. I had a bunch of things I wanted to do. I wanted to be a therapist at one point.
Yeah.
I wanted to be an educator. I wanted to be an entrepreneur, and I liked cooking. And I was like, if you really think about it, like doing the cooking thing kind of wraps up all that stuff.
Yeah.
It's kind of all of it, because you do have to be a therapist. You have to listen to the people around you if you want to be a leader.
Right.
You have to know how to talk to them. You have to know kind of the psychology of human beings in general. You have to educate. Any great chef or any great leader is also a great educator.
Yeah.
Of course, the cooking element. And then an entertainer, you have to be able to entertain. You have to be able to get people together and make them feel welcome and make them laugh. So so that's where it all started, I guess.
Because when we're gonna jump ahead, like, and jump back and all sorts of stuff, but like, so when you designed the space that you're in now, was all that thought through? Because it was a place you gutted, right, and redid.
Yeah. So yeah, it was. It used to be the space at 4419 West Montrose is like a space within a larger building. So we lease out just this one space. It's 8,500 square feet. When we first looked at it, we kind of came in and it was pretty barren, but it was really big and really open, had huge high ceilings. It felt like a brewery. We liked it. We felt a connection with it right away, and we really liked its openness and everything. On the design part, I think the place already kind of had a layout where it kind of had like these three areas. It had one really big area that was kind of a hall where these trucks would come in because they used to do prefab roofs in there. So it was a roof building company back in the 1980s. So they would like run roofs out of this place. And they had this huge garage door, which of course, is going to be awesome for any brewery, which kind of gave us the option to have like a door that opens up, since there's not really space on the sidewalk for a patio. And then there was like this like smaller area where the ceiling's a little bit shorter and that felt like a tap room. And then the kind of back area was definitely the brewery. And we're just like, yeah, we can see it right away. And we teamed up with Matthias Mergis and Folk Art Group, and with them comes Matthias's wife Rachel from FC Studio, who's an amazing designer, has designed some of the coolest restaurants in Chicago. One of my favorites being Owen and Engine. She designed that. Absolutely gorgeous, kind of like English pub space. It's very dark. It's got like a lot of earth tones. It's definitely like my kind of vibe, like kind of cavey. It's almost like I don't want God to see when I drink and eat, because it's never good.
Don't see your face while you're going in.
And so yeah, she kind of designed the space, and she did a fantastic job and kind of knew what we wanted and really went for it. So yeah.
Yeah. So when you came from Michigan to Chicago, like, what was your mindset going there? Did you go, because you went to culinary school, correct?
I did.
At that point, had you gone yet, or did you come to do it?
I came to Chicago to go to culinary school. Actually, it was a weird thing. I was scared shitless. I honestly, Don, the same guy I talked to you about earlier, he had actually passed away. And so this is kind of a theme that followed me throughout my life, is like kind of my mentors and people I adored kind of passing away. And, and it usually wasn't in a great way. For Don, it was a drug overdose that I think might have been a suicide on Christmas Eve, right before I left. Geez. So I basically like was living with him and doing odd jobs and kind of trying to find my path, but also cooking still. And I'd gotten really good at it. Like, I was really kind of a monster on the line. I knew how to throw down. I worked in places that would do 800 covers a night, and I could hang. And I was like, I loved what I was doing, but I was also worried about myself because all the lifestyle things that come along with that. Yeah,
is there like high burnout in that? And
totally.
And
I'd burnt myself out already twice in it, but I kept crawling back again and again, because it also kind of fed, I don't know, some kind of weird need in me to, I don't know, it was something about the anxiety, but also about the fire in the kitchen that I really liked. It was just a lot of intensity that I really enjoyed. And so, I just kept on kind of wandering back. But after Don had passed away, and I was kind of wondering what I should do, I was like really motivated then to find a path. It didn't matter what, it was just a kind of an awakening. And I was like, all right, I think I want to go out to Chicago. I had a friend whose father is actually was the editor-in-chief at the Chicago Tribune, and he was working at this country club with me out in Ann Arbor called Travis Point Country Club. And him and I got to talking, and he was like, yeah, man, I think I'm gonna go out to Chicago and I'm gonna start a culinary career there. And I was like, cool, where are you thinking about going? He's like, it's like one of the best culinary schools in the world. He's like, and it's right there in Chicago. Do you want to go see it? And I was like, hell yeah. So we went up and we checked it out, and he was supposed to go out there with a girlfriend, and they ended up splitting. So he was like, actually, I need a roommate. I don't know anyone really anymore there. So we moved to Rogers Park.
Is this Kendall College? Is that what it's called?
Kendall College, yeah. We moved to Rogers Park, in like the worst part of Rogers Park. The thing they called the Juneway Jungle.
Yeah.
We were basically told by the police after coming home after drinks one night that we should leave immediately.
That's good.
So
That's
we stayed with his parents for a while. They were nice enough to put us up, and then eventually we found our way up to Oak Park and stayed there for a while. And I was a cheesemonger and kind of went from there.
Yeah. So, were you interning because you met? I don't want to mispronounce his first name.
Homaro Cantu.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How did you meet him? Because you started interning at one of his restaurants, right?
Correct. Yeah. So he only had one restaurant when I met him.
Yeah.
He had an idea for about 50 million other ones.
Yeah.
He was that kind of guy.
Yeah.
It's funny. I was in culinary school. I had because I really wanted to work with Chef Takashi, who's a Japanese chef, who I think he got to start out in Florida. Then he made a restaurant in Detroit that was really well known, and I just really liked what he was doing. And he really, I also really appreciate Japanese cuisine, and I really wanted to work with him. And I went and staged at his place, and I didn't really hang. It was like very quiet. And they made me like brunoise, which is like cutting vegetables into an 1/8 of an inch by 1/8 of an inch by 1/8 of an inch cut. And when it wasn't perfect, they like threw it away and they made me start again. And it was really intense. I mean, I don't mind that kind of stuff. I've been pushed around by chefs my whole life. So it wasn't shocking in that way. It just wasn't very enjoyable. And I was hoping for a little bit more passion or something like that out of a place. And not to say that Chef Takashi didn't have passion. He had passion and he was a good guy, but it wasn't for me. And then I staged at Moto, and I came in for a working interview. Garrett, my roommate at the time, was already there.
Yeah. And
he was having a blast. He was telling me all about it. And I was like, all right. So I come down into this basement because the kitchen's in a basement, and there's like really loud techno, like almost like Blade meets the Matrix techno.
Yeah.
And these guys are prepping their asses off, and they're moving, and there's like this static energy in the air, and there's intensity, and there's focus, and there's drive, but they're still fun, you can tell they're having a good time. They're all fucking weird. I mean, it's like all like the nerdiest kids from your school took acid. Like that's the best thing. Like, it's like if like all those kids were just a hair cooler, that's like who Moto was. The old Chef de Cuisine used to call it the island of misfit toys, and that's exactly what we were. We were just a bunch of miscreants. So man, I started off running dishes there. Honestly, there was like some words that Omar had even said about me being stupid when I first started there. I'm pretty sure. Yeah, he didn't really appreciate all of my genius. Now he was a really weird guy and was pretty didn't have a filter. He's very much like our current president in that way. But he man, I would run dishes, and my idea was just to be faster and better than the guy next to me or the girl next to me. And I tried really hard. So I worked up from there to Garde Manger, where I was making edible menus. And
what was that like?
It was all very weird. My first day there was spent making little tiny hamburger patties out of cocoa nibs and melted chocolate, and then putting it between two macaroons as a burger bun. And
what are you thinking when you're doing that? Like,
I'm thinking to myself, I can't believe it took me fucking 3 hours to make 100 tiny hamburgers. I mean, it's like weird because I was like cutting this fake cheese that was made from like a banana puree that they had like stabilized with like these gums. And that's what I'm thinking the whole time. I'm thinking about this. I'm seeing this. I'm like, who the fuck are these people? And then they're like, oh, but the lettuce that you're gonna put on that little tiny burger, it's iceberg. And so it's like, what? You went through all this work to put all these weird things on here, and I'm still going to put iceberg lettuce on there. Like they like gave up. They're like, I don't know what to do for lettuce. Ideas. Just put some fucking iceberg on it. And then I had it, and it was really good. It was tasty, and they served it side by side with this like liquefied Acme bomb. It was like chocolate on the outside. It was graham cracker puree on the inside, and you put it in your mouth, and it tasted just like a s'more. And like my mind was blown. I was like, this place is insane. And I could see everyone kind of all had the same feeling. I mean, the first time I was in the doors, I looked over to this rack, and it had like all these like vacuum sealed bags with this liquid in it, and they were all glowing green, and I was like, what the hell is that? And I was quickly rushed into the laboratory where I was sat down and handed in a non-disclosure agreement and told to sign it immediately.
Really?
So I had to sign an NDA before even starting to work at Moto. Yeah, Omar was working on things like biofuel made from algae, and this is before people were even thinking about it. You know, this was 11 years ago, and he was doing that, or he was, messing around with bioluminescence, from, the same kind of thing that makes fish glow in the bottom of the sea. And, it's all, it gets activated by lactic acid. So he one day he's turns off all the lights in the kitchen, and he throws this stuff into some milk, and he drinks it down, and all of a sudden the straw, the milk, and his teeth are glowing green, and you're just like, what? He's like, we're gonna do this for a course. And I'm like, I don't know how you're gonna do it for a course. It's gonna be weird turning off all the lights in the restaurant for this course, but
dim them.
Dim them, yeah. Unless you're gonna serve in boxes. But it was always fun, because every dream was bigger than the last, and I think I was really inspired by him.
Yeah, because when you started brewing beer, was at one of his restaurants, right? It was at ING.
Wow, you know a lot. Yeah, it was at ING.
I thoroughly researched.
Yeah, no shit.
Yeah,
I did not. I always thought I was like, it's like me and 3 other people who know that. And I try to kind of hide it because it's pretty illegal.
Was it?
100% illegal.
Should I cut it out?
No,
oh, okay.
no, I don't give a shit now. I mean, I didn't know. I was none the wiser. I was a kid, and I didn't know anything about opening a brewery. And Omar had some of my beer. I gave him an Earl Grey tea milk stout I was working on. He brought it to a neighborhood function. He came back, and he was really excited about the beer, and his buddies all really liked it. And I was like, okay, cool.
Yeah.
He's like, we should brew beer at Ing, which was going to be his new concept. And I said, okay. And so he set me up this homebrew system, or we set it up, me, him, and Garrett actually. And we set this whole thing up, and I had a mill in the basement. I was making beer 5 gallons at a time. You couldn't buy a full beer. You could only buy it in flights.
Okay.
And on our first night, we sold a fuck ton of flights. And they were all weird beers. I mean, really weird beers that I look back at. I'm like, God, I would never brew that again. But it was, I was just having fun and doing my moto thing, but with beer. And people seemed to like it. So much so that the Illinois Liquor Control Commission came to our door one day with a big ass file, because we had been written up in a couple of magazines for this stuff, and they were like, "Are you Trevor Rose-Hamblin? And is this Ing?" And blah blah blah. I was like, "Yeah." And he's like, "Hi, we're with the Illinois Liquor Control Commission. We just wanted to ask some questions." I'm like, "Yeah, sure. 1 second." So I close the door and kind of go away, and we find out later that that Omar and his business partner at the time didn't have the licensing to be making beer. And so I'm shitting my pants. So I also made a series of just non-alcoholic sodas, cotton candy soda and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And so I threw it all on tap, and we gave them some soda, and they went on their way.
Yeah.
Basically just told us we know what you're doing. So stop right now.
Don't do that.
So that was kind of my entrance into the brewing world, but I loved it. I loved what I was doing. My now wife was in the basement with me, every step of the way, while I brewed these crazy beers, while I'm cussing and kicking shit because homebrewing sucks. And so
Were you making beer before that point?
Yeah. With me and the same guy, Garrett, man, we were best friends. We would sit around, we'd make beer. He had tons of. Garrett was really the guy who introduced me to brewing. He knew everything about the brewing process. He was really smart. So I didn't even start with extract kits. We started with whole grain. We were milling our own stuff at home. He had built out his own mash tun. I mean, even still, one of the beers I brew to this day called the Precinct is one of his recipes, or at least inspired by his recipe.
What attracted you to kind of move in that direction rather than food specifically?
I always I love low and slow processes in cooking. So whether you're braising or baking or anything like that it involves a lot of detail work, a lot of time, and a lot of attention, I always really liked it. And so when brewing became a thing for me, I just was always so excited about what was going to come out of that fermenter. And I was always excited about the journey and the path, and how every little tiny detail mattered, and it was just fun. I mean, I'm still having fun with it, and it's years and years and years later, and I'm still learning new stuff all the time. It's cool because it just like cooking, you get to be a student for life, except for you don't have to be studying on the weekends at night until 2 a.m. So it's it's about the same amount of hours as a cook, but they're just better hours. Like you can have a family, you can have a social life that doesn't involve just going to the bar every night. So
right. Yeah. So what is a beer that you made early on that kind of clicked for you where you're like, oh, this is actually something that I could do? And
the first one that we made that was really good was a Dogfish Head worldwide stout clone, and that's like an 18% stout.
Wow.
And I didn't think we would ever get that high, and we got real high. It exploded. We didn't know about blow off tubes at this time, so our airlocks like on the ceiling. I think our total yield was like 2 gallons, just because of that. And we eventually hooked up a blow off tube, and Garrett had added like a bunch of like star anise and all these other baking spices to make it very Christmassy. And I remember sitting there and I'm like playing video games on my computer and I'm drinking it. And I think I was like halfway through the glass and I was like really buzzed, but it was freaking delicious. I like really felt like the time of year, and I was actually affected. And at this point I had tasted a lot of good food, and I'm working at a really nice fine dining restaurant and that does really wacky things. And I was like really affected by how good our beer was. And I was like, holy shit, like I actually like this beer. And I brewed other beers I just hated, but we were making pretty good beer, we were really clean when we did it, and we were very focused on what we were doing when we were doing it. And Garrett definitely led the charge on that, but I really loved it. And like when he came out the other side, the amount of pride I felt in creating something, it was really fun. So yeah, that was a big first one for us.
And then, so at what point did you go over to Scotland? Because you went to Scotland for a bit to work at a brewery.
Yeah, so this was years later. So basically, I'd wormed my way up through the ranks at Moto. I was a server. Well, part of the cross-training program is you're a chef. I actually cried when they made me leave my meat station, which is kind of like basically like junior sous chef territory. Yeah. They made me leave it because as part of the cross-training, I was done with my internship. And then they're like, but we're going to hire you and pay you to become a server. And I was like, I've never done serving. I've always wanted to do serving. Yeah. I bought a suit. Talked to Matt Gunlock, who's still a friend of mine, and put a suit on and tried to make a foul-mouthed pirate of a chef into a server. Yeah, and it worked really well. I really loved it. I was learning a ton about wine from Matt Gunlock. I was even more passionate about the beverage side of things. Right, and I didn't become an official sommelier, but I was like really interested. I learned so much about the world through drink. Yeah, it was amazing, and then eventually became the assistant manager to Garrett at Ing, so I bounced over to Ing, and then Garrett left about 6 months after we opened. I took his position as general manager, and then ran Ing until Ing ran out, and then was flipped over as Matt left Moto and took over Moto as general manager, and then just kind of as Omar's right-hand man. Just was kind of doing everything with him, and then it wasn't... it was while I was still at Ing, before I was a GM of Moto, when Omar sat me down and he asked me, he's like, you've been my GM, you've been a chef, you've done all this stuff. What do you want to do? I said, I want to open a place. And he was like, oh, you want to open your own place? I was like, hell yeah. He said, what do you want to open? I said, I want to open a brew pub. And he goes, a brew pub? I'm like, yeah, I make beer and I'm having fun right now. And that was when I gave him a Earl Grey milk stout, and he tasted it and he thought it was fun. And I literally, after he came home from that party, he was like, hey man, let's do this. Like, let's seek this out. Because I also told him, I was like, look, at that time in Chicago, there wasn't a lot of brew pubs. There was breweries popping up all over the place. Yeah. Everyone seemed to want to go straight into brewing the beer and distributing it. Everyone wanted to be in bottles on shelves. Yeah. Which is funny because you make the most money out of the tap, but whatever. I was like, let's open a brew pub. We know restaurants. I'm learning about beer. We can do this, I think. We know how to work. Yeah. And so he's like, hell yeah. So we went through a million different places, looking at, different concepts. At one point we were called Outside the Box Brewing Company. We were called Crooked Fork Brewing while he was still around. And then eventually Old Irving, but kind of in between Crooked Fork and Old Irving, he was working me really hard, man. I was his general manager. I was his right-hand man. I was helping him open a coffee shop concept. We were doing work with different space programs that'll go unnamed. Yeah. And we were, we were doing really crazy shit. And I was like, I need to get the hell away from this guy if I'm going to really dig my teeth. Really dig into brewing, sink my teeth into brewing. So we did a show called Brew Dogs, which is about two guys own Brewdog Brewery out in Scotland, and they wanted to feature moto because we had an indoor hydroponic garden in the basement. And they wanted to somehow feature that and all of our laboratory equipment, like a rotary evaporator and, our immersion circulators and all that crazy stuff that we had around there. So they came in, they were part of it. And then instead of featuring Richie, our chef, at the time, Omar was like, you should be on this episode since we're opening that brewery. Sure, man. So I became friends with James and Martin, who are the owners of Brewdog. And I became even better friends with Jared, who's the executive producer. And him and I just kind of stayed in contact. The dude was such a good guy. After we connected through that episode, he just kept checking up on me. And one day he's like, hey, man, how's everything going? And I was like, everything's great. I'm working a lot. And I wish were brewing or learning this process because me and Omar are going to open this brewery one day. He goes, well, I know a couple guys in Scotland that might take you for a while. I was like, really? And so I was like, I basically set up an apprenticeship with them. And so flew out to Scotland. Omar helped fund a ton of it, pretty much all of it. Paid me while I was gone, which I thought was beyond crazy awesome. I stayed in government housing with a woman there, basically an Airbnb. Gotcha. And man, I worked at Brewdog in Ellen, Aberdeenshire for about 3 months.